joining me and returning to the program, Aaron Kleinman, Director of Research for the state's project at Future Now. Aaron, it looks like you have not left your house, office, wherever it is that you are, in at least since probably a week before the election. So is someone bringing you food?
Listen, sleep. I feel like I can really catch up on sleep around sometime the middle of 2023.
Okay. All right, good.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you. But it does look like you are, I get the sense, I can just imagine you're just in front of a wall of monitors, looking at counting, because it still continues, right?
Yeah. So in a number of states, most of the counting is done, but in Pennsylvania and New Hampshire, you have a bunch of recounts going on right now that will actually help determine control of who controls the legislature there. But if you look at the results we have in so far, by some pretty narrow margins, we nevertheless have flipped both chambers in the Michigan legislature, which means Michigan is a Democratic trifecta for the first time since 1983. We flipped the Senate in Minnesota and held the House, again, by narrow margins, like a couple hundred votes shift, and we don't have those. And now in Minnesota, you have a Democratic trifecta for the first time in a decade. In Pennsylvania and New Hampshire, as I mentioned, there are recounts right now. There's a chance that Democrats at least have a piece of power in both states, but in both states, people really thought, well, maybe they'll get there in 2024, 2022. They're just trying to, hold their ground. And so exceeding all of our dreams there. Nevada, we lost the governorship, but we increased our margins in the legislature. I could go on, Sam, but yeah, we've been having a good time.
That's what you're here for. I mean, this has got to be like, this has got to be, you got to be celebrating over there. This is what you do.
I'm celebrating by just looking at these numbers and smiling. In Arizona, we held our ground. We knew after redistricting really scrambled a lot of districts. And so we're like, if we can hold our ground in 2022, and so we're just one vote shy in both chambers. And now you have a Democratic governor in Arizona. So we can really kind of work toward, maybe, putting a stop to the worst excesses. And maybe we can work with some Republicans there. There are a few in Arizona who actually believe in democracy. So maybe there's a pathway there in Arizona. In Wisconsin,
we should say in Arizona, this is the first time in decades upon decades that the governor and the both senators are Democrats.
Yeah, since 1950. And I got a 3-year-old who he must be a Carrie Lake fan. I don't know.
Really upset about Arizona.
I'm sorry. You know what? We fell one seat shy in both chambers. He's sad about that. But we still held our ground there. And I'm trying to tell him every day, buddy, it's okay. We're just a seat shy. And really, in Arizona, we have a lot to build off of heading into 2024. That's what I tell him every night.
But that's no consolation. That's the thing I like about your kid. Just will not take anything short of a full victory. And that's the kind of spirit that we need. Yeah.
And then other states, in North Carolina, we actually prevented a supermajority there. You have a Democratic governor, some kind of unfriendly maps in the legislature, but by about 400 votes, I think we prevented a supermajority. And again, the person, Diamond St. Williams, who held that seat by about 400 votes, she was part of our Give Smart program. Again, our small donors really came through in some of the most important races here. So people really made a difference here. In Maine, we held our ground in both chambers. We actually, in a year where people were worried that Maine might flip Republican, where the RSLC, the Republican National Committee, put a lot of resources into trying to flip Maine, we held our ground in both chambers. Maine remains a trifecta, as it has been since 2018. New Hampshire, again, it's going to come down to there is a tied race. And the outcome of that,
we should say literally tied.
Literally a tied race, 970 votes each for a New Hampshire House seat. And the outcome of that, seems like it will determine which party is in the majority in the New Hampshire House.
What happens if it comes out 970 to 970?
So the state legislature would
send your
choose
son
the winner.
up there. What?
Yeah. The state legislature would choose the winner. And right now, because Republicans still hold the state Senate, they would have a majority. So it might end up being a Republican if it's still a tie, but it's kind of unprecedented what's going on there. And another thing to keep in mind with the New Hampshire House is you have 400 members there. It's the biggest legislature in the country other than the U.S. House of Representatives. On any given day, there's about 20 missing, and so it's kind of just chaos no matter what happens. So, yeah.
Sounds like they're meeting in your kitchen right now.
I think so. And then finally at Colorado, we kind of went in there late because they have the lowest contribution limits in the country, basically. And we helped win so many state Senate seats. They actually didn't have enough room in their caucus room, and now they're kind of assured of keeping the Senate more or less through 2026. Wow. Which is and by the way, so all of these great results, I want to keep in mind that us at the States Project, we were one of the biggest participants in all this. For example, in Arizona, we were the #1 contributor. We spent more than 30 times any other outside group. Pennsylvania House, the national groups kind of wrote it off. We were there. And Minnesota, we were the largest funder on our side. Michigan, we were 8 times as big as any outside funder. So if, again, the real kind of, the people in the trenches, the people who actually ran for these seats and won and were able to persuade all their voters, hey, freedom's on the line here. Your freedom to choose, your freedom to choose your own representatives. This is all on the line. You got to vote for me. Those are the most important people here. But if you're coming from the outside and you're like, or if you care about the state legislature, wherever you are, and you want to make a difference, at the States Project, we really kind of have been able to make a huge impact there. And, again, check us out at statesproject.org if you want to kind of join in and help make a difference.
You didn't need to do that pitch. I mean, obviously that's why you're here, Aaron. I mean, we know, I mean, that is there, if there was an organization that it was as focused on this as you guys were, they would be here right now without their kid yelling in the background. But okay, was there places? I mean, this is it's incredibly consequential, both in terms of like the material differences in the state, what it's going to mean for the difference between not having a veto-proof majority for some of these Republicans in like a place like Wisconsin or in other places is North Carolina are big in terms of things like abortion bans, et cetera, et cetera. They are. It also has a big. It creates a bench for down the road for Democratic politicians, which we have been sorely lacking because of the 1,000 seats that were lost during the Obama years. It also impacts the narrative that is at least causing disarray amongst Republicans, for the time being. Were there states where we lost, where like that there was a material difference in terms of like, did we lose a trifecta, or did the Republicans gain a trifecta?
The only state where we lost the trifecta was Nevada, and that's because we lost the gubernatorial election there, but we actually gained seats in the legislature. So that was kind of the incumbent governor there. I think Nevada, more than any other state, was impacted by kind of COVID-19 mitigation. And so that really just became very hard. It was kind of there was that. And then also the Republican candidate there ran just a better campaign than most other Republicans across the country. And there was the confluence of those two factors. Things are still a bit unsettled in Alaska. Because basically in Alaska, they have the ranked choice voting. And so we won't know for, I guess, another week who actually is elected. And then after the election in Alaska, typically you have kind of these shifting coalitions that don't break neatly on partisan lines that end up kind of deciding who controls the legislature. So Alaska's up in the air. But other than that, Democrats retain power, any power that they did have across the country.
That's huge. What are the implications for 2024 in this regard? Like, I know that, for instance, the Senate map looks the federal Senate looks tough for Democrats. It's been a while since I took a look at it, but there are, as far as I know, you don't have any Republicans that are up in like a purple state for reelection, and you got plenty for Democrats. What does it look like? I mean, but that doesn't implicate at all like state houses, right? I mean, we're
Right.
okay.
So the biggest thing really is we were able to flip Michigan and Minnesota Senate. So we have those now through absent like a special election loss or something like that. We have, we're in control there through 2026. Pretty much everywhere else I mentioned, they'll be up again. Or I guess in the Nevada Senate has like staggered terms, but pretty much everywhere else they'll be up again in 2024. But the big impact on 2024, and something that the reason why we really poured so many resources into these races and why people are so responsive to that, is there was a real risk that state legislatures would try to steal the 2024 election. And if you look at 2020, again, you had Rusty Bowers go before the January 6th commission. He's the former Arizona House Speaker. And he said, the Trump people came to me and they were like, you need to give us like 12,000 more votes in the state, have the legislature overturn the election results. And what Bowers told them was that I don't have a legal basis for doing that. Now, one thing that could change between then and the 2024 kind of post-election period is in a couple of weeks, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case called Moore v. Harper.
Right.
And in that case, the Supreme Court may decide that state legislatures have the sole ability to determine basically the outcomes of federal elections. It's a very scary case. Hopefully, the fact that kind of, we showed everyone, by the way, Democrats can win state legislative seats too. Hopefully, a very partisan Supreme Court will decide, hey, maybe this is really playing with fire. We should back down. But it's still a real risk. And so if we kind of went into 2024 where Republicans had these majorities in Michigan and in Pennsylvania and, and had bigger majorities in Arizona, because again, we think there are some pro-democracy Republicans we can work with there. If they'd had those big majorities, there would be a real risk for state legislatures basically nullifying the results of the 2024 election. And after these elections, we really kind of there's a big blow toward that risk. I think that's just a lot less likely now. And that really is a credit to kind of the work that we at the States Project did, but also, our donor communities who really came through for this election, Give Smart, our Giving Circles. These people poured resources into the races that really made a difference in chamber control in these states that really are going to help save democracy. Races that were literally decided, a few hundred votes had switched in a few different places.
New Hampshire could rest on one vote.
Yes. Yeah. Like the margins in these races are just so astronomically small. The average state legislative
more people voted for me as vice president of my high school senior class than are going to be deciding that race in the control of the New Hampshire State House. That's nuts.
It is.
I mean,
really
my race was not close. I'm here to tell you. I mean, it was a while ago, but that's nuts. I mean, so people should vote. I mean, because the amount of time that would be invested in that what is it, 1941st vote. I guess, right? It was 970. Did you say?
Yeah, 970. So yeah, the 1,941st vote. If you live in
that would have
the
been
fourth ward of Rochester, New Hampshire,
they would have decided control. We'll see how the recount goes, but they would have decided control of the New Hampshire State House. All right, so you're going to take a nap sometime like in May of 2023. Yeah. When you wake up from that nap, what are you going to focus on?
So heading into, the work doesn't stop. Like I said, in 2024, I think New Hampshire and Pennsylvania really will be critical because lawmakers there can take office in December. And so if there's any post-election shenanigans, we want to be sure that won't happen. But yeah, I mean, even kind of coming up in 2 months, there is a special election for the Virginia Senate that could really help protect choice in the Commonwealth of Virginia. in April, there's going to be a Wisconsin Supreme Court election that
I was
could
going to
help
ask you,
determine
do you
whether
guys
that
get
state-
involved? Do you guys get involved in those Supreme Court elections?
No, that's not part of what we do now, but obviously it's really important for state legislatures. So at the very least, kind of letting everyone on your show know that there's this really important election coming up in Wisconsin. It's like the least we can do. And then in 2023, the full chambers in the Virginia legislature are going to be up. You have a fleece-wearing guy who pretends he's a moderate, but then goes around with Carrie Lake trying to run that state. And I think the people should show him, hey, maybe you should focus on the Commonwealth of Virginia instead of your presidential ambitions. And so heading into 2023, that's going to be a big one too. So, the work never stops. But at the same time, again, we're all really happy about what happened. And again, the margins in these races are so close. The amount of money spent is so much less. These races cost about 3% what a U.S. Senate race costs. So everyone who got involved in this, it's not just, I'm just one guy, but everyone who kind of came out and was willing to stand with us as a group to say, hey, these elections matter. Democracy matters. The right to choose matters. Everyone who stood together and did that, again, everyone gets, take your own little victory lap there, because you really help make a difference in just, again, so close races.
So close. Aaron Kleinman, Director of Research for the States Project at Future Now. We're going to put a link to both Future Now and States Project in our podcast, our YouTube description. Thank you for the work you did. Congratulations. It couldn't really,
Thank you.
It's hard for it to imagine for it coming out better. I mean, I feel like if 6 months ago I said, give me your best case scenario, you guys sort of like surpassed it.
We did. Sam, you and I have actually talked about what I think really was the main animating thing in this election before, a lot of negative partisanship. And the reason why I thought, when a lot of people were saying, hey, I don't know if you're going to have a chance in Michigan, you're going to lose ground in Arizona, you don't have a chance in Minnesota. And I'm like, hey, these are very evenly divided states, and they have maps that either party can win on. And what you really have is negative partisanship plays such a key role. And what you need to do now is you need to kind of just go out there and get the resources to your candidates so they can go out and say, hey, this really, my opponent really stands for some incredibly extreme right-wing things. They will vote for some incredibly extreme right-wing things in their state legislature. And because we were able to help them do that, because we were able also to help them get, or really encourage them to get into their local news, because local news is the most trusted news source for pretty much everyone. I know we kind of think it's all Facebook groups and crazy stuff right now, but like getting a story in your local paper, getting a story in your local TV station is still huge. Getting them to knock on doors, which is something that we really couldn't do in 2020 because of the pandemic. And then just kind of helping them get the staff that they need. Those are kind of the 4 pillars of our strategy. And just being able to go out there and get them those things. We knew that in an environment that was as polarized as ours is now, where really so many people have such strong feelings against the Republican Party and just kind of need to be activated, and people who kind of feel kind of negative against both parties, we really did have a story to tell about. You may not think that the National Democratic Party is all that great, but we need to tell you all the extreme things that this opponent stands for and all the good things that we stand for. If we could just get that message out, we knew that we had a chance in these states, and that's why we were there, and that's why we ended up succeeding, even though the margins were just so incredibly slim.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Aaron Kleinman, again, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.